Hello everyone, welcome to Chehel's Zoology Lectures. On this YouTube channel, we will be talking about ecology, physiology, diversity, developmental biology and evolution. If you like any of the video on this channel, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also hit the bell icon for further notifications. Thank you. Good morning everyone. This is Dr. Jyoti Chahal. Today we'll talk about chordates. So first of all, we'll talk about origin of chordates. How chordates have originated, from where the chordates have originated. Definitely, chordates must have originated from the previous group, that is non-chordates. But which stock of non-chordates? There are 9, 10 phylum in non-chordates. So which phylum of non-chordates have given rise to chordates? So that is the question. What are the problems in identifying the origin stock which have give rise to chordates? First problem is there is a wide morphological gap between non-chordates and chordates. And second is there is no fossil record to bridge the gap. There is no fossil record to bridge this gap, morphological gap. So now why the fossil record is not there? Lack of fossil record indicates that chordate ancestors must have been soft-bodied organisms which can't be preserved. So that can be a reason for that. Now, when chordates have evolved sometime during Cambrian period, 500 million years ago, and to be exact, it should be 570 million years ago during pre-Cambrian period, almost at the same time when invertebrates were beginning to evolve. At that time, chordates were evolving, chordates were originating. Okay, so on the basis of resemblance between lower chordates and some invertebrates, many theories of chordate evolution have been postulated. And some of these are coelenterate theory, nematines theory, annelid theory, insect theory, arachnid theory, and echinoderm theory and ascidian theory. Now, these last two theories, echinoderm theory and ascidian theory, are the most appropriate and are well accepted everywhere. So, we will discuss these two theories here. Now, talking about echinoderm theory, this is also termed as deuterostome line of chordate evolution or deuterostome theory. It states that origin of all deuterostomes. Now, what is deuterostome? As the name suggests, deutero plus stoma. Deutero means secondary or which comes later, and stoma means mouth. Okay, mouth that comes later or secondarily. And the other group which is contradictory to this is protostoma. Proto means prior and stoma means mouth will come into existence first. Okay, so it states, echinoderm theory or deuterostome theory states that origin of all the deuterostomes like echinoderms, hemichordates and chordates, that is from a common ancestor. There was one common ancestor for the origin of all these three groups. A close relationship between these three groups suggests this. Now, what are these relationships? So there are four lines of evidences to prove that there is a close relationship between these three groups. What are these lines? First is embryological evidences, second is biochemical evidences, third is serological evidences, and the fourth one is skeletal evidences. So we'll talk about these one by one. So starting from embryological evidences, which we can see during the embryogenesis. Okay, now both echinoderms and chordates, they have number one, equipotential and radial cleavage. Equipotential, when all the blastomeres will be of same size, that will be equal. So that is termed as equipotential. And radial, what is radial cleavage? Radial cleavage is along the radius, the blastomeres will be cleaved and all the blastomeres will be of equal size. Now during the radial cleavage, after third cleavage, here you can see in this picture on the right hand side, here you can see this is first cleavage. After first cleavage there are two blastomeres, here you can see, and Second cleavage, 4 blastomeres, and third cleavage, there are 8 blastomeres. Now you can see that 8 blastomeres are present in two tiers, one above the other. 4 blastomeres are at the lower tier and 4 blastomeres at the upper tier. Now they will be placed exactly above each other. The lower blastomere will hold the upper one just exactly opposite to it, not at the junction line of two blastomeres. So that is radial cleavage. In case of spiral, the upper tier will be slightly twisted, either can be towards the right side or towards the left side. Accordingly, that will be dextral or sinistral spiral cleavage. So, okay, then, okay, next is, yes. So both echinoderms and chordates, they have equipotential and radial cleavage. So this is one similarity. Now talking to the next, Anterocoelus, coelom and mesoderm development. In both of these groups, the coelom is Anterocoelus and the mesoderm develop by Anterocoelus mode. That means Antero plus coelus. Antero is anteron, coelus is coelom or pouches formation. Here you can see in the first picture, here you can see that archenteron is in the center, that will form the future gut, which is also termed as sometime anteron short form, and outside is ectoderm. There is no mesoderm yet. Now here two pouches are emerging from this archenteron. You can see early mesoderm pouch. Here it is written early mesoderm pouch, and these are appearing just like ears of a bear, polar bear. So now next, here the pouches have been completely formed, and there is separation of pouches from gut. Now this archenteron, it has formed the gut in between, and ectoderm is outer circle, outer larger circle. You can see it clearly. And now these pouches, inside them they will be having coelom and they will enlarge in size. Here you can see in this pic, last pic, coelom is developing in between. Now the structure, now these are slightly curved bean shaped structures, and this holds coelom in it, and these are bounded by mesoderm. Now the central circle is gut, which is bounded by endoderm, and these bean shaped structures are having coelom and these are bounded by mesoderm, and this outer structure is ectoderm, and this forms the body wall. Now next is deuterostomous mouth. Both of these group, echinoderm and chordate, they have deuterostomous mouth. Now what is deuterostomous mouth? I have already told you that deutero means secondary, stoma means mouth. Now here you can see that during gastrulation, and there is blastopore which will form anus, and the mouth will be formed opposite to it. On the opposite end of the gastrula, mouth will be formed. On the opposite end of the gastrula, mouth will be formed. Here you can see, and this condition is termed as deuterostoma. So all these organisms, echinoderms and chordates and hemichordates, these are deuterostomes. The other condition is protostome, in which this blastopore, it will form mouth and the anus will be formed at the opposite. Okay, but here in deuterostomous condition, blastopore will form anus. You can see here, I will highlight it again. Okay, so here you can see this is blastopore, this structure, and here it will form anus. Anus will be formed prior to mouth. After formation of anus, then mouth will be formed at the opposite end. Okay, so that is deuterostomous condition. So okay, moving forward, in this in the similar category of embryological evidence, central nervous system develops from dorsal strip of ectoderm. Okay, now this purple structure, it is ectoderm. It will move like a groove inside, and it will form dorsal hollow central nervous system in both of these organism groups, that is echinoderms and chordates. So in both of these groups, central nervous system that develops from the dorsal strip of ectoderm, which is shown here in the purple color, it will move down in a shallow groove and it will be hollow from inside. That's why the central nervous system is hollow, dorsal and hollow. So now this blue structure is the ectoderm that will form the body wall, and this purple structure, that is central nervous system. So in both these groups it will be formed like this. Now the last point in embryological evidence is resemblance between bipinnaria larva, that is of echinoderms, and tornaria larva of hemichordates. They have remarkable similarity among themselves. Now what is that similarity? Both of these larvae are minute. These are oval, as you can see here, Tornaria and early Bipinnaria. Both of these are minute and transparent and oval, transparent body with external ciliated bands, which are identical in these two. Here you can see ciliated bands. It is written here, ciliated ring at the lower portion. Here this is ciliated ring. Now all over you can see ciliated band, ciliated ring, which is similar in both of these larvae, and they have similar number of coeloms. Coeloms are five in both these cases. Here only three are shown, but there are five coeloms. Mouth, position of mouth is ventral. This is ventral surface of the larva. This is ventral side. Okay, this is anterior, this is posterior, and this is dorsal. Okay, so mouth is present on the ventral side in both of these larvae, and anus is present on the posterior side. Also, these have an apical tuft and a sensory ciliated tuft at the anterior portion here, which is not shown here. So apical tuft ciliated portion, that will be like this on this. Okay, so that is a similarity between larvae, which proves that these two groups are closely related. Next, moving forward, second is biochemical evidences. Now, both echinoderms and chordates, they use phosphocreatine in their muscle energy cycle. Now, what is this energy cycle of muscle contraction? During the contraction of muscle, energy is utilized, and phosphocreatine and phosphoarginine. These are two phosphorylated compound, phosphorylated creatine and phosphorylated arginine, which serve as rapid energy reserve for of high energy phosphate bond in the skeletal muscles. Okay, so in echinoderms and chordates, phosphocreatine act as energy reserve for muscle contraction cycle. In case of non-chordates, phosphoarginine, mostly non-chordate phyla, they use phosphoarginine as their energy reserve during muscle contraction cycle, as their energy reserve for phosphate bond. You can see the structure of phosphocreatine and phosphoarginine on the right hand side. Hemichordates and a few echinoderms, they use both phosphocreatine as well as phosphoarginine, and this indicate that they are connecting links between chordates and non-chordates. So again, it proves the evolutionary line through hemichordates from non-chordates up to chordates. So that is the biochemical evidence. Now the next is serological evidences. Serological means which are related to blood proteins, body fluid proteins. Now chordates and echinoderms have more similarity between body fluid proteins than those of chordates and annelids or chordates and arthropods. They doesn't have that much similarity, but chordates and echinoderm, they have a striking resemblance in their body fluid proteins. So higher the degree of resemblance of proteins, this shows the evolutionary relationship. Hence the chordates are more related to echinoderms. So again, it proves deuterostome line of chordate evolution. Now the next is last point of the evidence of deuterostome theory is skeletal evidences. Adult chordates and echinoderms, they both have endoskeleton which is present inside the body, and that endoskeleton is derived from mesoderm, that is originated from mesoderm. So again, that is the point of similarity in these two groups. So again, it proves that both of these groups have a common ancestor. Now there is something which is disapproved, like if you talk about the symmetry, the radial symmetry of adult echinoderms. Here you can see the starfish, and that is having radial symmetry. Now what is radial symmetry? In this there is no right or left part. There is no right or left part, and the sides exhibit correspondence to or regularity of parts around a central axis. There will be one central axis and there will be parts around this central axis, you can see here. So there are five parts: one, two, three, four, five, and six parts. Okay, so there are six parts around the central disk, and which will show similarity. Okay, so that is radial symmetry along the radius. Okay, there will be no left or right part. And all the chordates, they have bilateral symmetry. Here you can see in this picture of human being, and if you cut it through the anterior posterior axis, so there will be two equal halves which you can call as left or right half. So that is bilateral symmetry. So all the chordates, they have bilateral symmetry, and all echinoderms, they have radial symmetry. So that is a point of disapproval, that maybe these two groups have not originated from a same or common ancestor. But that is not true. If we see the larva of echinoderms, you can see Bipinnaria, Oikopleura, Auricularia, Doliolaria, Echinopleura. So these larva, they have bilateral symmetry. Okay, so these larvae, they have bilateral symmetry. That means radial symmetry of adult have been superficially superimposed upon a basically bilateral organization. As the larva is bilateral and adult is radial, so this we can say that this radial symmetry has been superimposed on a basically bilateral symmetry. Okay, so moving forward. Conclusion of echinoderm and deuterostome theory. Hyman in 1959 and others, they have concluded that three groups, that means echinoderm, hemichordate, and chordates, they have a common ancestor. Here you can see uh, this is the common ancestor. They must have a deuterostome and ancient deuterostome as a common ancestor. And echinoderms and hemichordates, they branched off from a common evolutionary line that finally culminates into chordates, that will end into chordates. So here you can see that echinoderms, they have separated. Okay, here in this red line you can see here echinoderms have been separated, and then hemichordates have been separated, and then this line will finally culminate into chordates, giving rise to cephalochordates, urochordates in between, and finally culminating into vertebrates. Okay, so uh, that was the main conclusion of echinoderm or deuterostome theory. Now we'll talk about the second important theory, that is Ascidian theory. So here, Ascidian theory, that was given by Garstang in 1928, later on which was supported by Beryl in 1955 and Romer in 1959. According to this theory, the early chordate ancestors were marine, that means in the ocean, and that were filter feeders, and fixed. That means they were not capable of movement or locomotion. They were fixed to a substratum, and they were ancestors were filter feeder. They will obtain their food particles by filter feeding through gill slits. Okay, so here you can see this is the ancestor, which is sessile, filter feeder, and marine. Okay, and how this ancestor has originated, it must have originated from primitive pterobranch like sessile ancestor, which was arm feeder. Here you can see arms. Here these are arms. on this. Now these arms, they will move in a circular fashion, and inside these arms, in between these arm, in the center there is mouth. So these arm will move in the water current, they will draw water current inside the mouth, and the food will be provided to the organism with the water current. Then this primitive tarobranch like sessile ancestor, it has given rise to tarobranchs, which is a part of hemichordates. And a separate line of primitive echinoderms have separated off from here. You can see these are echinoderms. And now these tarobranchs, they have lophopore. Now what is this lophopore? Lophopore is a horseshoe shaped group of tentacles which are having cilia on them. And these tentacles, these are retractable. Lophopore is retractable, that means it can be extended outward from the groove, from the body, and it can be retracted back. So this extension and retraction, that will help in capturing the food particles, which will move down through the grooves of this lophopore of these tentacles with the movement of cilia downwards. Okay, and that will be carried to the mouth. So that is lophopore. So from this primitive arm feeding tarobranch like ancestor is originated, it will culminate into lophopore containing tarobranch, which will finally change into a gill feeder organism, which is sessile and marine. Here you can see, and that is the ancestor of all the chordates. Now a separate line will go from this from this filter feeder organism, this one. From this, a separate line will go to acheron worms, that is hemichordates will hold here. And then further, now this sessile filter feeder marine organism, it will give rise to a larval form. Here you can see, this is the larva, ancestral tunicate larva, which is free swimming and is tailed larva. This tail will help in movement, and so this larva is advanced than the adult. Now this larva, and it will be having well developed muscles, and it can move around in the ocean. So this larva, it can change back to its adult after metamorphosis. Okay, and the metamorphosis will be retrogressive. Okay, retrogressive metamorphosis. What is retrogressive metamorphosis? It is uh, retrogressive metamorphosis is a type of metamorphosis in which organism will degenerate into a lower form. A larva will degenerate into a lower form and will change into something, an adult, you can say, which will be having lower characters than that of the larva. As you can see that this larva is freely movable, but the adult is sessile and fixed to a substratum. So that is a lower category, and that is a degenerative form than that of the larva. So that condition of metamorphosis is termed as retrogressive metamorphosis. The otherwise, the condition is progressive metamorphosis, in which the adult will be more advanced than the larva. But here the case is reverse, and this metamorphosis is retrogressive. So now this larva, it will again develop, so that will basically help in the dispersal of the organism, because adult can't move but larva can move from one place to other. So it will help in dispersal of the species. So larva will move and then will attach to a substratum and will change into adult. Here you can see a double headed arrow here. Okay, so there is double headed arrow. That means adult will give rise to larva, larva will give rise to adult. Now occasionally some of these larvae, they have undergone neoteny. Now what is neoteny? Neoteny is when some of the larvae, they will precautiously develop into adults by developing gonads and will start reproducing. When the larva will start reproducing before physically changing into adult, that means it will not acquire the characteristics of adult. That means it will not be fixed onto the substratum. It has not metamorphosed into adult, but still it has developed gonads. While it is still movable, it is moving from one place to other by swimming, and it has developed gonads and it has started reproducing. So that condition is termed as neoteny. Okay, so some of the larvae of these tunicates or primitive ascidians, they have undergone neoteny, and they have lost sessile adult stage, and they have changed into something, some organism, lower chordate. You can say neotenic chordate here, this this portion, neotenic chordate, which can move from one place to other place. Now that is capable of reproduction and capable of movement. Now this group will give rise to, on one side, branchiostoma, which are cephalochordates, and on other side, that will give rise to ostracoderm. That is a group of fishes which are extinct nowadays. Now ostracoderms, these are freshwater as well as marine fishes. Now this form, which has formed because of neoteny, that will develop strong muscles and will undergo some physiological changes, some morphological changes, because it has to face the seaward water currents, because it will be moving towards the river mouth or estuary from sea. That means it will be moving from marine water to fresh water, and there the water current will be downstream, and the organism, this neotenous form, it has to move upstream. Okay, so it has to develop strong muscles so that it can face water current and flow against the swim of water, against the flow of water. It can swim against the flow of water, so that's why it will develop strong muscles, locomotory mechanism, and it will increase in body size. It will be having better sense organ, and it will be having a kidney. That is a must for freshwater life. As you know, if the marine organism will move towards the freshwater, definitely its body fluid will be having more salt concentration, and there will be endosmosis from freshwater will move inside its body, so it has to regularly throw out that excessive water so that it can maintain its osmoregulation of the body fluid. So kidney is a must, so it will develop kidney. So finally these ostracoderms will be formed, and that are the true chordates, which are nowadays extinct. And from these ostracoderm, all the other chordate forms have been evolved. So this was all about the origin of chordates. There are two most important theory which were telling about how the chordates have been originated. Now the origin of chordates has been explained, but unfortunately it will always remain speculative or under doubt because of lack of fossil record to support this. So this was all about and this is all about origin of chordates. Next, we'll talk about evolutionary relationships of chordates. So, while talking about evolutionary relationships of chordates, here you can see chordates have evolved somewhere around 570 million years ago from invertebrate chordate, ancestral chordate, which is termed as a primitive deuterostome, and that will give rise to that will give rise to urochordates. Here you can see that will give rise to urochordates. Here this is urochordate, and uh, that happens all during the precambrian period. Here you can see on the left hand side there is time scale, geological time scale with era and periods. So during a precambrian era, this evolution of urochordates have taken place, and then in the same era cephalochordates and vertebrate line have separated. Here this is cephalochordate. Now talking about the vertebrates, firstly the organisms which fall under vertebrates, which have evolved under vertebrates, they doesn't have any jaws, so no jaw, no paired appendages. That means there were no paired fins and no jaws, so that were grouped as agnatha. Agnatha means jawless. A absent, gnatha means jaws, absent jaws. So next, jaws and paired appendages appeared, and teeth and paired fins appeared. Jaws has appeared, paired appendages has appeared. That means teeth has appeared and fins has appeared. So now the group has developed during the Ordovician period into two further branches, chondrichthyes and osteichthyes. That means cartilaginous fishes. Chondrichthyes means cartilaginous fishes, sharks and skates and rays, and osteichthyes, these are bony fishes. Now, uh, air bladder or lung has developed before the origin of osteichthyes or bony fishes. Then legs have appeared during the This period is Silurian. During the Silurian period, legs have appeared and the group has formed amphibia. Now the class amphibia have originated. Then amniotic egg have appeared. That is during the Carboniferous period. Here you can see Carboniferous period. And during Carboniferous period, egg has appeared, amniotic egg has appeared, and land organisms start evolving. So first group is Reptilia. From Reptilia, two separate lines culminates. One will be having feathers that will culminate into aves, that means bird, and other line that have hairs and that will develop into mammal. Now the mammal line has separated from reptilian line much before in the time scale, and that is again during Carboniferous period. And during Triassic, birds have started evolving. So this was all about the evolutionary relationships of chordates. Now you must take care that whenever you are drawing any evolutionary relationship or any phylogenetic tree like origin of chordates in the previous slide which we have discussed, you must move from bottom to upward, because in geological time scale you have to move towards recent time, starting from the previous or ancient time. So you must start from the bottom line and will move upward. Start from the bottom line and will move upward in the time scale. And the arrows you will put, that will show the length of time. So you must take care when you are putting arrows, and you always move during the evolutionary time scale from bottom to upward. If you are drawing any flowchart of classification, then you can move from upward to downward, but not in the case of evolutionary relationships, because that should be matched with the time scale and that will always move upward. Okay, so that is the precaution that you must take during the drawing of this evolutionary relationship. I hope that was a little helpful, and thank you.